What if the person everyone ignores, the one they mock and dismiss, is secretly the most powerful man in the room? Leo traced the worn handle of his mop across the polished marble floor of the corporate lobby, the rhythmic swish-swish a familiar, numbing soundtrack to his life. To everyone here, in this glass and steel tower of ambition, he was just part of the background, a ghost in a gray uniform. He was Leo, the janitor. The single dad. The loser. The words were never spoken aloud to his face, not directly, but they hung in the air, thick as the chemical scent of the floor cleaner. He saw them in the averted gazes, the condescending smiles, the way people stepped around his yellow, wet floor sign as if it, and he, were minor inconveniences in their very important lives. The worst of them was Mark, a sales manager with a jaw too sharp and a suit too tight, who seemed to derive a special kind of pleasure from reminding Leo of his place. "Leo, my man," Mark would boom, his voice echoing in the cavernous space. Missed a spot, he'd point a polished Italian leather shoe at an imaginary speck of dust, a cruel smirk playing on his lips as his colleagues snickered. Leo would just nod, his face an impassive mask, and dutifully push his mop over the perfectly clean tile. He had to. For Lily. His 7-year-old daughter was the sun his entire world orbited. Her laughter was the only music that mattered, her tiny hand in his the only anchor he needed. She was waiting for him in their small, cramped apartment, probably drawing another picture of him as a superhero with a mop for a cape. She saw a king where everyone else saw a janitor. That was enough. Tonight, the mockery felt sharper. Mark had closed a big deal and was celebrating with his team near the lobby's espresso bar, his voice loud and brash. "It's about separating the winners from the losers," he declared, clapping a junior salesman on the back. "You've got to have killer instinct. You can't be some floor sweeper, content with the scraps." His eyes flickered to Leo, a glint of malice in them. A wave of heat washed over Leo's neck, a familiar, dangerous warmth he'd spent years learning to suppress. He gripped the mop handle tighter, his knuckles turning white. He could end this. He could dismantle this arrogant peacock in a dozen different ways before he even hit the floor. The knowledge was a ghost limb, an instinct he had to chain down every single day. Instead, he took a slow, deep breath, the scent of bleach and ammonia grounding him. He exhaled, and with it, the anger receded, locked back in its cage. He had to be the janitor. He had to be invisible. It was the only way to keep Lily safe. Across the lobby, Clara, the marketing director, watched the exchange. She saw the sneer on Mark's face and the quiet, almost unnerving stillness in Leo. She'd always felt a strange pull of sympathy for the janitor. There was a dignity about him, a profound sadness in his eyes that seemed out of place. He wasn't just weary, he was weighted. She'd seen him in the mornings, dropping his daughter off at the daycare downstairs, the transformation in him absolute. The tired janitor would melt away, replaced by a father whose entire being radiated a fierce, tender love. He would crouch down, fixing a stray hair on his daughter's head, his voice a low, gentle murmur that seemed to build a fortress of safety around the little girl. Clara, who navigated corporate minefields with a smile and a spreadsheet, found that quiet display of devotion more powerful than any boardroom victory. She saw Mark's bullying for what it was, the pathetic posturing of a deeply insecure man. And she saw Leo's response, his deliberate non-reaction, as something else entirely. Not weakness, but a kind of strength she couldn't quite decipher. As Mark and his cronies finally moved on, their laughter echoing off the marble, Clara walked over to Leo. "Don't listen to him," she said softly, her voice startling him from his thoughts. "He's an idiot." Leo looked up, his gaze meeting hers. For a split second, the weary mask slipped. She saw a flicker of something ancient and hard in his eyes, a glimpse of a man who knew the true cost of things. Then it was gone, replaced by a small, tired smile. "It's just noise," he said, his voice raspy. "I'm good at tuning out noise," but Clara knew, with a sudden, unshakable certainty, that he wasn't just tuning it out. He was containing a storm. The next evening, the storm almost broke. Mark, still riding the high of his success and fueled by after-work drinks, decided to amplify his torment. As Leo was cleaning the executive floor, Mark accidentally knocked over a full pot of dark roast coffee, creating a huge, steaming puddle on the pristine white carpet of the CEO's waiting area. "Oh, clumsy me!" Mark exclaimed, his words slurring slightly. "Leo. Clean up, on the double." And be careful, that's a $20,000 rug. Wouldn't want you to have to sell that, well, whatever it is you own, to pay for it. His sycophantic junior partners laughed on cue. Leo arrived with his cart, his expression unreadable. He knelt, carefully assessing the spill. He didn't grumble or sigh. His movements were economical, precise. He selected a specific chemical from his cart, applied it with the focus of a surgeon, and began to work on the stain. There was no wasted motion, no sign of frustration. There was only a cold, methodical efficiency that was almost hypnotic. Clara, working late again, witnessed the scene from her office doorway. She wasn't just watching a janitor clean a mess. She was watching a master at his craft, a man whose control over his own emotions was absolute. As he worked, Leo's sleeve rode up slightly, revealing a faint, intricate tattoo just above his wrist, a coiled serpent biting its own tail. It was a symbol of eternity, of cycles, but it looked less like a philosophical statement and more like the insignia of a forgotten legion. Mark, however, only saw a man on his knees. Hurry it up, buddy. Some of us have important places to be, not just polishing them. That was it. A line had been crossed. The air in the room grew heavy, charged with an unspoken energy. Leo slowly rose to his feet, turning to face Mark. The weary janitor persona evaporated like mist in a harsh sun. His shoulders squared, his posture shifting from subservient to commanding. The gaze he leveled at Mark was not one of anger, but of chillingly calm assessment. It was the look of a predator sizing up a trivial threat. "You should be more careful, Mark," Leo said, his voice dangerously low and steady. "Accidents can have unforeseen consequences." The words were simple, but they landed with the force of a physical blow. Mark's smug expression faltered, a flicker of genuine fear appearing in his eyes. He saw, for the first time, not a janitor, but a man he did not know at all. He blustered, trying to regain his footing. "Is that a threat?" Leo held his gaze for a beat longer, a silent promise hanging in the air, before the mask slipped back into place. "Just advice," he said, turning back to the now fading stain. "Carpet's almost good as new." Mark, unnerved and unsure of what had just happened, muttered an insult and quickly herded his team toward the elevators, his bravado shattered. Clara remained in her doorway, her heart pounding. She had just seen the real Leo, and it was both terrifying and magnificent. Later that night, as the building emptied and a quiet hush fell over the skyscraper, Clara found herself unable to focus on her work. The image of Leo's eyes, cold and sharp as fractured ice, was burned into her mind. On a whim, she walked out to the main office floor. She found him there, under the dim security lighting, carefully watering the office plants. It was a simple, tender act that stood in stark contrast to the men she'd seen confront Mark. "They'd all die if someone didn't do it," he said, without turning around. He must have heard her approach. "Corporate budgets for everything except keeping things alive." She stood beside him, watching his gentle hands tend to a drooping fern. That was intense, earlier. With Mark, he shrugged, not looking at her. "He talks too much." "You looked like you were going to do more than talk back." He finally turned, his expression softening as he looked at her. "There are a lot of things I could do. But I have to think about my daughter. Lily is everything. So I push a mop and I water the plants." He gestured to a framed photo on a nearby desk, a stock image of a smiling, generic family that came with the frame. "People like Mark, they live in this world," he said, his voice laced with a weariness that went bone deep. "They think this is real. The promotions, the bonuses, the $20,000 rugs. But it's all just a game. The real world has teeth." A silence stretched between them, comfortable and profound. In that moment, Clara wasn't a director and he wasn't a janitor. They were just two people, working late in a silent tower of glass, sharing a moment of unguarded truth. "My ex-husband used to say things like that," Clara confided, the words surprising her. "He was a journalist. Covered war zones. He said once you've seen what people are capable of, you can never unsee it." Leo's eyes met hers, and a current of understanding passed between them. He didn't need to say anything. She knew he had seen it, too. "I should let you get back to work," she said, her voice softer than she intended. "Thank you for watering the plants." He gave her a genuine, heart-stoppingly rare smile. "It's my pleasure, Clara." He knew her name. Of course he did, he was observant. But hearing him say it sent a warmth spreading through her chest, an unexpected and welcome heat in the cold, air-conditioned night. The connection forged in that quiet moment was not lost on Mark. In the days that followed, he noticed the way Clara would seek Leo out, sharing a coffee during his break, asking about his daughter. To Mark, this was an unforgivable transgression. The marketing director, a woman he himself had tried and failed to impress, was consorting with the janitor. His wounded pride festered, turning into a venomous obsession. He decided to destroy Leo completely. The company's annual shareholder gala was the perfect opportunity. It was the most important night of the year, a lavish affair held on the top floors of the building. Security would be tight, the CEO and the entire board would be present. Mark, who had a mid-level security clearance, devised a plan. He would create a minor security breach, disable a few cameras, trip a silent alarm in a non-critical area, and pin it on Leo's negligence. It was a surefire way to get him fired and humiliate him in front of everyone, especially Clara. What Mark didn't know was that his petty act of sabotage would be the catalyst that brought Leo's carefully constructed world crashing down. On the night of the gala, as champagne flowed and polite laughter filled the penthouse ballroom, a team of highly skilled corporate mercenaries was using the chaos of the event as cover. They weren't interested in the guests, they were after the company's new proprietary tech, the files for which were stored on a secure server in the sub-basement. Mark's tampering created the exact electronic loophole they needed. As he keyed a code into a maintenance panel, feeling a thrill of vindictive power, he unknowingly disabled a secondary failsafe, opening a direct path to the server room. Suddenly, the lights flickered and died. The music ground to a halt. Emergency lights cast the opulent ballroom in a ghastly red glow. A collective gasp rippled through the crowd. Then, the main doors burst open. It wasn't building security. It was 4 men dressed in black tactical gear, armed with silenced weapons, their faces hidden by ballistic masks. Panic erupted. Screams echoed as guests scrambled for cover. Mark, his face pale with terror, realized what he had done. This wasn't part of his plan. Downstairs, in the main lobby, Leo was polishing the brass fixtures on the front doors when the alarms began to shriek. He didn't panic. He didn't even flinch. He simply set down his cloth, his movements calm and deliberate. He closed his eyes for a single, brief moment. In that darkness, he said a silent goodbye to the janitor. When he opened them, the weary, downtrodden man was gone. In his place stood someone else entirely. His posture straightened, his eyes becoming cold, calculating chips of flint. He scanned the lobby, his senses instantly processing every detail, the exits, the number of panicked employees, the flashing lights on the security panel. He could feel the shift in the building's rhythm, the discordant note of a hostile presence. He pulled a beat-up flip phone from his pocket, a phone Lily thought was just for emergencies. He pressed a single button. It wasn't a call for help. It was an activation signal. He moved toward the stairwell, his gait smooth and silent, a predator on the hunt. Clara had herded a small group of junior employees into a large supply closet off the main ballroom. Her heart hammered against her ribs, but her mind was clear. She was trying to keep them quiet, trying to think. Through the crack in the door, she saw the armed men methodically securing the room, their professionalism terrifying. Then she saw a flicker of movement near the service entrance. It was Leo. But it wasn't. He moved with a liquid grace that defied his janitor's uniform. He was a shadow, hugging the walls, his eyes constantly scanning, assessing. One of the intruders moved to check the service corridor. Leo melted back into an alcove. As the men passed, Leo struck. It was brutally, terrifyingly fast. A blur of motion. An arm snaked around the man's throat, another hand striking a precise point at the base of his skull. The men crumpled without a sound, a puppet with its strings cut. Leo dragged him into the shadows, disarmed him, and whispered something into the man's radio, his voice a perfect mimic of the guards. Clara's mind reeled. The janitor, the quiet single dad who watered plants, had just neutralized a professional soldier with his bare hands. The world no longer made sense. Leo, now armed with a silenced pistol and an earpiece, moved back into the ballroom. He saw Mark cowering behind a tipped-over ice sculpture, weeping. He ignored him. His focus was on the remaining 3 intruders, who were now trying to force the CEO toward the executive elevator. That was where the high-security server access was. Leo raised his pistol, but there were too many civilians. He needed a distraction. He glanced up, his eyes tracing the massive, multi-tiered crystal chandelier that hung over the center of the room. He saw its winch mechanism, its support cable. A plan, insane and brilliant, formed in his mind. He keyed the radio he'd taken. Team B, status, he barked, his voice altered, authoritative. The leader of the intruders paused, confused. Who is this? There is no Team B, asset compromised, Leo said into the radio. Initiate Plan Omega. It was gibberish, but it was confident gibberish. The intruders exchanged uncertain glances, their perfect plan suddenly complicated by a ghost team. That was the only opening Leo needed. He fired 2 shots. Not at the men, but at the chandelier's primary suspension point. The massive fixture groaned, sparks flying. It didn't fall, but it tilted violently, swinging like a giant pendulum. Panic erupted anew as guests scrambled away from the swaying behemoth of crystal and light. The intruders were distracted, their attention pulled upwards. In that split second, Leo moved. He crossed the floor in a silent, deadly sprint, closing the distance. 2 more silenced shots, precise and economical. 2 of the intruders dropped, neutralized by perfect headshots. The leader spun around, raising his weapon, but Leo was already on him. He disarmed him in a flurry of motion, a sequence of joint locks and brutal strikes that ended with the man on his knees, gasping, Leo's pistol pressed firmly against his temple. The entire engagement had taken less than 10 seconds. The ballroom fell into a stunned, terrified silence, broken only by the whimpering of Mark and the groaning of the damaged chandelier. And then, a new sound. The thud of helicopter blades beating the air above the building. The windows of the penthouse were suddenly flooded with blindingly bright searchlights. Ropes dropped, and sleek, black-clad figures began to rappel down the side of the skyscraper. Simultaneously, the lobby doors burst open. But it wasn't the police. It was a dozen men in impeccably tailored tuxedos, armed with state-of-the-art weaponry. They moved with the same fluid, deadly grace as Leo, securing the building floor by floor. One of them, a silver-haired man with a scar running through his eyebrow, entered the ballroom, his eyes scanning the scene. He saw the neutralized intruders, the terrified guests, and Leo, standing calm amidst the chaos. The man's formal demeanor broke into a look of profound relief. He approached Leo and bowed his head slightly. "Mr. Vincenzo," he said, his voice resonating with deep respect. "It is good to see you, sir. We came as soon as you activated the signal." Clara, emerging from the closet, stared, her mind struggling to connect the 2 names. Leo, the janitor. Mr. Vincenzo. The name was whispered in the highest echelons of global finance and security. The Vincenzo family was a dynasty, a private, staggeringly wealthy empire specializing in logistics, risk management, and discreet security for world leaders and corporations. They were ghosts, legends. And their heir was standing in the middle of the room, wearing a janitor's uniform and holding a gun. The CEO, pale and shaking, stumbled forward. "Vincenzo. As in Vincenzo Global." Leo nodded, his attention still on the room, his posture relaxed but ready. "It's been a while since I used the name." He turned to the silver-haired man. "Francesco. Secure the asset. Find out who sent them. And get him out of my sight." He gestured with his chin towards Mark, who was now staring at him with a look of pure, unadulterated horror. 2 of the tuxedo-clad guards hoisted a blubbering Mark to his feet. "But, you're the janitor," Mark stammered, his world completely undone. Leo looked at him, and for the first time, he let a sliver of his true self show in his smile. It was cold and sharp as a razor. "I needed a quiet life for my daughter. And you, Mark, were a recurring, minor annoyance. Now you're a liability." He turned away, dismissing him as completely as one would a piece of trash. As Mark was dragged away, protesting his innocence and screaming about security cameras, Leo's eyes found Clara's across the ruined ballroom. He holstered the weapon and walked towards her, his men parting silently to let him through. The power radiating from him was immense, a palpable force. But as he reached her, the hardness in his eyes softened, replaced by the familiar, gentle warmth she had come to know. "Are you okay?" he asked, his voice the same quiet murmur he used with his daughter. She could only nod, speechless. I have some things to take care of, he said. But I'll explain everything. I promise. The following day, a different Leo Vincenzo walked into the office. He wore a bespoke charcoal suit that fit him like a second skin. He wasn't there to clean. He was flanked by Francesco and 2 other guards, who waited discreetly by the elevator. The entire office fell silent as he walked through, employees staring in disbelief at the man they had once ignored. He walked straight to Clara's office. She was sitting at her desk, staring into space, having not slept at all. He closed the door gently behind him. I ran away, he began, his voice low and earnest. My family, our business, it attracts a certain kind of danger. My wife was killed in an attack meant for me. After that, nothing mattered except keeping Lily safe. I wanted her to have a normal life. A life where her father wasn't a target. So I disappeared. Became a ghost. A janitor. No one looks twice at the janitor. He sat in the chair opposite her, the powerful CEO of Vincenzo Global, suddenly looking vulnerable. I never meant for you to get involved. Clara finally found her voice. The man I saw last night, and the man who talks about his daughter's drawings, which one is the real you? They both are, he said, his gaze intense and sincere. The janitor was a role, but the father is real. And the man who is falling for the brilliant, compassionate woman who saw him when no one else did, he's real, too. Just then, the door opened, and a little girl with bright, curious eyes peeked in. It was Lily. She ran to Leo, wrapping her arms around his legs. Daddy. Francesco said you were in a castle. Leo scooped her up, his entire demeanor softening into pure paternal love. This is my friend, Clara, he told Lily. Lily gave Clara a shy wave. My daddy is a king, she announced proudly. He just didn't want anyone to know. Leo looked at Clara over his daughter's head, an entire world of hope and promise in his eyes. He had his empire back, but it was clear that his true kingdom was right there, held securely in his arms. He had been a king in hiding, protecting his princess. Now, he was asking Clara if she wanted to help him build a new castle, one with walls strong enough to keep the dangers of the world out, but with a door wide open for love. How many heroes walk among us, hidden in plain sight, their true power concealed beneath ordinary clothes and humble jobs? They are the single parents, the quiet workers, the unseen guardians, waiting for the moment to remind us all that true strength isn't measured by a title or a salary, but by the love you fight to protect. What hidden strengths do you see in the people around you?